Welcome you guys into the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, sports editor at Lootpress, joined as always by sports writer Rusty Udy. Rusty, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I went to the eye doctor today, and I keep getting closer to blind each year, so hopefully I don't get too much worse, but doing pretty good.
Hey, well, some people are going to take that and run with it, whenever they don't like what you write. They're like, all right, well, he's clearly getting blind,
Yeah, just remember that when I get the 5s and 6s and 8s mixed up.
Absolutely. And as always, we've made it to episode 4, and we have a great show lined up for you. There was a lot of really good action in week 3 of the football season, starting to lose track of weeks now. And we're going to go ahead and break it all down, talk about some of the soccer matches we saw last week, and a big one kind of coming up this week too.
Huge, yeah.
And again, we'll get to that in a moment, but as usual, I want to start off with football. We're going to dive right into week 3 and a lot of the action that we saw and started on Thursday night. You got to see the tail end of this after you finished up your assignment that night, and that is Bluefield, Greenbrier East. Greenbrier East came down to Mitchell Stadium. It's the first time these two teams played, I think, since 2017 or so. And it looked like Greenbrier East was going to run over them. I had the privilege of covering this one. And Greenbrier East, to their credit, they looked really good. I came away from that game surprised that they didn't score against Beckley, just because I thought they did a good job of getting their athletes in space. And man, this was an exciting game. Bluefield ended up winning 42-40. Came down to a 23-yard touchdown pass thrown with 4 seconds left, and might be the beginning of the Max Simpson legacy in Bluefield. Man, this was exciting, and I'm kind of glad you got to see the end of it.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, because the young man is just a freshman. He's only basically 14 years old, and had a couple rough games. He's really taken some heat about being a starting quarterback, and I think we even touched on it. As much as Bluefield coaches have been around, we knew they saw something in this kid, and I think he showed it that night. I mean, it just exploded on the scene. And some of the passes he made were incredible. Of course, it always has some good receivers. It helps out, but. I'm telling you, that touchdown pass he threw in the back of the end zone, last play of the game, it was do or die. I mean, that was a dime. I mean, that was one of those that if it was on ESPN, they'd just be raving about that pass. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And, like you say, sometimes those jump start things into a big career. So, you can definitely see why they wanted that young man back there, because he's a player.
Absolutely. Just kind of to recap the way this thing transpired, Greenbrier East, Brody Hammock threw for over 300 yards, had 5 touchdowns. They led 40-19 with, I think, a little over 8 minutes to go. And then Bluefield started the comeback drive. Ty Patton scored a touchdown. And then they get touchdown passes from Simpson to Willis Wilson, and then another one to win it to Keyshawn Smith. And really, it spoke a lot to me of the players making plays. I didn't think Bluefield handled the clock very well. They still have trouble right now with getting the plays in on time and burning through timeouts, because that last drive, they went 74 yards in a minute and 8 seconds or so, right. And they didn't have any timeouts because they burned the last one. And Greenbrier East in their attempt to burn the clock out, they threw it on second down, that stopped the clock, and then they run it on third down to get it going. And then on fourth down, because they're down at Bluefield territory, they go for it, and Ty Patton makes a really good play at linebacker to jump up and tip the pass. Otherwise, that's probably first down in the end of the game. But to me, if you're Bluefield, I don't think I'd seen them at a point any lower than when they were down 40-19. Because somebody even mentioned when I posted the Twitter clip, what were the defensive backs doing on this touchdown? And just it kind of allowed the receiver to kind of catch it like a fair kick or a fair catch or something like that, and he just kind of scoots into the end zone.
Right.
But yeah, with as bad as things had been over the first 2 weeks, to come back and to win that way is pretty impressive. And we talked about Simpson's performance: 380 yards. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. And this came with Jeff King out. He went out in the first half.
Right.
He got hurt a little bit on offense, was limping. He tried to come out and play defense, and there was just a play like he just went down, like he couldn't do it anymore. And he had 101 yards from scrimmage on 4 touches in the first half. including a Moss-worthy catch.
Right.
And
That was incredible.
that's their guy. So they ended up, they went a little bit more to Willis Wilson, who's a sophomore, and the sophomore came through 8 catches for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had a rushing touchdown as well. This is exactly what you want to see if you're Bluefield. These younger kids growing up, especially with that type of adversity. Freddie Simon after the game was discombobulated. He's like, "You got me." He said, "I'm kind of speechless." And he said, "Yeah, it's kind of like that weird game from 2004." And I just kind of wanted to be like, pump the brakes for a second. For those that don't know, the weird game he's talking about, I think, is the semifinal game in 2004. They were down 14-0. With like 2 minutes left to go. They get a pick six, they get an onside kick, they score, and I think they win that game in double overtime, with 2 minutes to go. So
Right.
I pumped the brakes on a game like that. But yeah, to me, that was really incredible. And it's a shame for Greenbrier East. Coach Ray Lee was out, but I was really impressed by their offense. I know you saw them against Beckley, but Brody Hamrick, Nate Shuttle, those guys look really, really good.
Yeah, if they have the time, they're as electric as anybody. We talked about it at the beginning of the season. Brody's a big-time quarterback. I was impressed with him last year, and I even talked with him about that. In the Woodrow game last year, he absolutely took a shot. I mean, I really thought, man, he's either knocked out or maybe hurt. And he went out for maybe a series, if that, and came back in. And I'm telling you, that's when I was sold on that kid right there, because most kids at that level, at that age, when he took a shot like that, would be like, okay, I may be done for tonight. We'll go on. That almost fired him up and got him back. And he's got a big arm. He can throw it. He's got weapons. I think against Beckley, just didn't have any time. They couldn't run a football because of the size difference in the trenches, and that made a huge difference that night. But man, he's talking about, I'm not a big shootout kind of guy. I like more 17-14, 21-7. But man, I just sat in amazement and watching that game. I've never seen anything like that. And to come back, I mean, that is maybe one of the most improbable comebacks I've seen in a football game. When you factor in, not just they were down basically 3 touchdowns, but in the time, but the kids. I mean, they're just kids out there right now. They're not. There's no experience, and man, they look like a bunch of veterans out there coming back.
Absolutely, and for Simpson, 380 yards passing in your third game. We talked about this. This is my 8th season doing this. I've only seen 2 performances I can really remember in the area like that. Grant Cochran in 2021 had 400 yards passing against Parkersburg South.
Right.
And last year in that crazy Princeton-Bridgeport semifinal game, Chance Barker had over 400 yards passing. But I don't remember anything like that. And I talked to former offensive coordinator Fritz Simon, because he probably had the record on this. Because Bluefield, for as rich as the program's history is, it's not quarterback centric. It's usually running back centric. You think of your Charlie Tynes, your Mookie Colliers, and kids like that. But one of their Kennedy Award winners was a quarterback, and it was Will Cole. So I said, how close did he come to getting the record? And the unofficial record, from what I understand, is 390 yards whenever they played Scott in 2008. So 10 yards away from a kid who, during a Kennedy campaign, that's pretty close. And to me, it was pretty amazing. For Bluefield, it could potentially spark you, and I think that these points are really going to matter. You get your first win against the AAA. I think Greenbrier is going to win some games. As long as they can get things fixed on the back end and get their offensive line protections in order, their offense is good enough. They're going to win some games.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, you kind of wonder, just how many dynamic offenses are they going to run into, down the road like that. Now, I know they've got Shady, who's playing some really good football right now. And, they've got some tough games, but and from their point of view, man, it's just got to be a gut shot. You really feel like you have that game won, and it just kind of slips away on you. And and it's not like you don't see this at all levels. West Virginia just blew a lead this weekend against Pitt. In the last seconds. So it happens, but it's got to be a tough shot for Greenbrier East, and it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from this, because that's kind of a devastating shot this early in the season.
And we'll talk a little bit more about Bluefield's matchup next week, but I want to move on to the game that you covered on Friday, and that's Oak Hill Princeton. This one was kind of interesting. I asked you going into the game to keep track of 2 different things, the penalties and the sacks. And the penalties still continue to be an issue for Princeton. It's just that they're at a point where talent-wise and skill-wise, they're so overwhelmingly better than most of the teams that they're playing that it often doesn't matter. They gave Oak Hill, they spotted them a lead, and I credit to us last week. We talked about one of the keys to the game for Oak Hill is probably going to be shortening the game, and they did it in a more effective way than I thought they would. It's just
that's a fact.
You scored the first 7 points, and then Princeton scores the next 31 because that's how good they are.
Yeah, and the first 7 points that they scored, was aided by an offside penalty. They were lining up to go for it on 4th and 1. Oak Hill was deep in their territory, about the 26-yard line, and I'm thinking, surely they're not going to do this right now, especially this early in the game with as explosive as Princeton is, because you don't want to give them short fields. And I didn't ask Devon about it because there was so much that went on afterwards, but they basically got them to jump, and then they just grinded it out. Kind of got a fortunate break on the kick. I mean, I'm not sure it was a onside kick per se, but it did hit the kid from Princeton, popped up. J.D. Moritz recovers it. He seems to be around the ball about all the time. And they basically I think Princeton ran their first play in the first quarter with like 1:21 to go. So that was an ideal start for them, except the fact that they didn't score on that second drive. And I think that was, that would have been huge if they could have done that. Now, I think they would have still had some trouble slowing Princeton down once they got going. But, Princeton had kind of helped them a little bit on that second drive. And, they were down inside the red zone. I think they were inside the 10. And going forward on 4th down, and had a huge sack from I believe it was Jennings that had the sack. So they just seem to, and I've thought about this game all week. It just seems so amazing that they did things that you thought were kind of crippling in a way, and they would just make some huge play afterwards, whether it be a sack, a 27-yard run, a big pass. It was just really weird to watch, that they could bail themselves out that many times and nobody blinked. It wasn't like, there was tension amongst the team, when things were going a little sour like that. They just lined back up, ran the play, and survived it and kept moving on. It was impressive. It was a head scratcher, but it was impressive.
Yeah, and it's one thing. I've been on Princeton all year long, and I've got the penalty tracker. They're up. By my count, they're up to 45, I think, for 375 yards. And 375 yards is a lot, especially through 3 games. They're on pace for over 1,000 yards in penalties in the regular season alone. And they're able to offset it with explosive plays. It's like, all right, we get penalized 10 yards. Yeah. For example, there's the juggling Wyatt Klein catch.
Right.
Before that play, I think they had a penalty. It's like, okay, we'll just have a 37-yard catch where a kid juggles it out of bounds and he ends up coming away with it.
Yeah.
And you have things like that.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the play, I think right before halftime, where Barker, on 4th down, they go for it, and Barker throws a pass, and it probably should have been intercepted. And given how things were, probably a pick 6 right there. Yeah. But the ball gets dropped, and. Yeah. They have a lot of things going right for them now, but those margins for error tighten up a lot. I wrote about it in my deep post this week. They remind me a lot of that Parkersburg South team in 2022, and when I did the Kennedy column that year leading into the semifinal games, I said the reason I wasn't going with Parkersburg South quarterback Robert Shockey is because I didn't think that he valued the ball. They had a lot of turnovers. Even when they played Princeton that year, they turned the ball over. They were extremely penalized. But they had Shockey, they had Gage Wright, who was a Warner candidate, and then they also had Cyrus Trout, who was a Moss Award winner that year. Right. So they offset it with their skill and talent. But then they got to the state championship game against Huntington. They committed, I think, 10-plus penalties for 135 yards or so. And that game was I think a 7-3 game with like 17 minutes to go. Yep. And then you just keep turning the ball over. You turn the ball over 4 times in that game. And I feel like if Princeton doesn't get the penalty situation calmed down, that could kind of end up being their fate, because when you get to a Bridgeport, Bridgeport's going to want to go into that game. They're going to want to shorten possessions. Right. They saw what happened last year. Yeah. Fairmont Senior might try to do the same thing, because as talented as Princeton is, and Fairmont Senior is really talented, I'm not sure if they can keep going at them that same way. And Bridgeport, we've seen them kind of do this before. Those years when they played Bluefield, they were like, all right, we can't match them tick for tack. But when they played them in the state championship game in 2019, they were able to shorten the game, capitalize on some Bluefield turnovers and penalties, and then they come away with really what was a shocking win in a game they weren't expected to win at all. And that's how you lose state championships. So I think for Princeton, you've got to get that down. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be penalty-free. If you play a penalty-free game, that's really rare. But if you can get that down to maybe 4 or 5, and it's only costing you 25, 30 yards a game, that's just a different story.
You know, and like I said before, I'm really amazed at how well they handle those situations. You know, they don't, seem to be disrupted by it, but you wonder as it goes along, is that going to be a problem? I think it was the other night, Markel Lowe scored twice, and both of those got called back. He had like a 60-yard kickoff return. It got called back. So, he's very much a team guy, and that's what the ultimate goal is a team situation, and I feel like that's what they're aiming towards, but that grinds on you a little bit, when you keep having big plays called back and things like that, and you just hope it doesn't, become dissension within, because that can be a really big problem.
And Lowe in particular has been the one that suffered from it the most. He had 2 or 3 in the Capital game that were called back, and I believe he had 1 in the Bluefield game that was called back too, and then there's 2 more, and this is a guy that Coach Taylor talked about before the year. I feel like he's right there in that Kennedy race.
I agree. Yeah.
And 6 touchdowns, when it comes down to it, that makes quite a bit of a difference. And he has talent and everything like that. And he's being extremely patient, I think, in that sense. But they need to clean it up, because what they're playing for, they're not playing for anything before November. They're playing for Lately Field in December, and not just playing to be there, but playing to win.
Yeah, he definitely runs, as they say, runs with bad intentions. Him and Jennings both run hard, and there was one run the other night at Lowe. He picked up about 25 yards like it's nothing, but he looked like a pinball in there. He was banging around. I couldn't bring him down. He was just banging around, would not go down. I mean, that kid's impressive, and if he had 6 more touchdowns right now at this point of the season, he would definitely probably be the Kennedy favorite right now, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I told you, but I just compiled the passing leaders before we did this, and they'll probably be out before the show drops. I did all the statistical leaders. Right now, I have him leading the area, I think, in touchdowns. He has 7 rushing touchdowns. Okay, he's tied right now with Caden Vance, and we'll get to that a little bit more later with where he is in the leaderboards. But 7 touchdowns, you add up 13 touchdowns in 3 games,
and you're catching statewide attention then, already.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just kind of my thing with Princeton. I wanted to see them clean it up. They've got 3 games, and we'll talk about their matchup later this week, later in the show. But yeah, that's a good one. Nicholas County Independence. This is the one that I got to cover, and we talked about this last week. It's a measuring stick, and Nicholas County brought back a ton of kids. Independence brings back some, but they lost a lot of their foundational pieces from last year. But man, like the Independence's offense really put on a clinic in this game. Yep. I think I counted it, an explosive play in the run game. I consider an explosive play 15 yards, passing play 20 yards.
Right.
I think they had well over, in the passing game, they had like 5 explosive plays, 67 yards. Yep. And we talked about it. They might not have to move Silas Nelson to receiver at all. I was really impressed with Dalton Atkins and Linksweiler. He had 3 catches for over 100 yards, and there were pass interference flags thrown on 2 of them, like 2 of the 60-yard catches. He's that good. Like, he has great ball skills, great speed downfield, and Brock Green, the quarterback, put it right on the money, dropped it in the bucket to them each time. Offensively, they are extremely scary. That's only game 3. They look really good. Nicholas County, watching Colton Helms, I thought he struggled. It just never really seemed settled. There were a lot of passes, the running backs in the flats that, sailed over their heads, and they could have been easy completions to maybe give your guys an opportunity to do something after the catch. And they could just never get the offense going. Even the touchdown they did score was aided by 3 straight penalties from Independence, a 15-yarder, 15-yarder, and a 5-yarder. So you give them 35 yards, and it moves them deep into your territory. Yep. And then the other touchdown was a pick 6, but to me, I thought this was pretty much a clinic from Independence.
It was impressive because, when I watched Nicholas County and Oak Hill really struggled offensively. Now, it's night 1 and everything like that, but they struggled offensively. There was a couple big plays in that game, but they had trouble moving the ball on them. So, even when Nicholas County went down to Chapmanville, they only gave up 6 points there. So, Independence playing their third road game in a row, and, it traveled about 6,000 miles, in those 3 weeks. You thought maybe, okay, they may be right for the picking. It could be a close game. And man, they just come out and ran over top of them. I mean, that's, to me, is as impressive a win as I've seen this year, because it was never close. It really wasn't. And, Nicholas County's defense is legit. But, to your point on Colton, I mean, he seemed to have those same, issues in the first game, which was kind of surprising. Kind of threw it off as maybe first game jitters and things like that. So it does seem out of character for him. He's been a really good quarterback. I think he'll get it straightened out. But, the bottom line is it's a huge win for Independence. I mean, a big win.
Absolutely. I think that, if you're Nicholas County, you're obviously looking at that, okay, they're a top team in AA, and they just came into our house and they beat us this way. It was kind of a pick your poison game, and Gene Morris even mentioned that. We load up the box to try to stop Silas, and then they just throw it over our heads. We just couldn't do anything. He said, I asked him, I said, so what is it? Where did all the big plays come from? And your perspective, he said, man to man, we just couldn't man up with them.
Right.
It's kind of what it is. And it really is. They have an explosive offense, and they finally used Cole Laxton a little bit in this game to help spell Silas at the end, and he got he had some nice runs. I think he had 4 runs for 47 yards or so.
Right.
And that's kind of what Independence has done well the last couple of years. Is that they've had somebody as a change of pace back. When it was Atticus, they had Judah. When it was Judah, they had Tyler Linksweiler. So they've always had somebody, and maybe what Laxton did kind of helps them a little bit there. But yeah, defensively, 2 interceptions. Caden Bradbury had the 2 interceptions. They had 6 sacks. Alex Blankenship had 2. Miles Greenway had 2. I think he's up to 4.5 on the year. They just do so many different things well defensively. And it just seemed like Nicholas County could never get settled into that game. And if you're Independence, and again, we'll talk about this later, that's probably a good little precursor for your home opener.
You got to be, as a defensive coordinator, banging your head against the wall too, because going into the season, you're thinking, okay, well, we're going to force the young quarterback to kind of make his way and stop the other parts, loading up the box and things like that. Brock has proven well above his age, and impressive performance by him. And now what do you do? I mean, it's just like what Gene said, you're kind of picking your poison there. And the bad part of it is it's a bad poison, whichever one you pick, I don't know. I mean, I was impressed by the win. I was impressed by Brock. Their defense is, probably loses some of the limelight in a lot of these years because their offenses have been so explosive. But, to basically, riddle Nicholas County like they did defensively, man, that's impressive. Now they get to finally come home for a change.
Yeah, and just one more point to kind of hammer at home. They lost. So their first drive, they lost the yard net, but the next 4 drives, 90 yards, 84 yards, 66 yards, 86 yards. They went the length of the field to get these drives. The only issue, penalties. They had quite a few unsportsmanlike conduct and personal fouls. And John Lilly was very peeved after that game.
Right.
He had to take a second to kind of compose himself, and most of his post-game interview was fueled by irritation with those penalties. But honestly, that's kind of what I want to see. A game like that, and that was a big win for the program where they're at. Nicholas County, I think, still projects to be a playoff team.
Yep.
You go into
it's going
their
to get
house.
them some wins too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you go into their house, you beat them, and you're sitting here thinking about all the things that you did wrong. So I think that's very encouraging. So I'll be curious to see how they clean it up.
I'm
next
sure
week.
Independence want to be 3-0 at this point in the season. There's no doubt, and they wouldn't say any different. But with your only loss being basically an attrition game at Herbert Hoover, who has proven himself to be a very talented AAA team, going to win a lot of games too. I think 2-1, they're in pretty solid shape right now.
Absolutely. Hit on this one quickly. West Side Man, we talked about it last week. Mentally, how would you rebound?
Yep.
And I thought they rebounded. After the big emotional win, could you handle it? And they did. They went down to man. They won by 14 points. Defensively, they seem to play well. They force a couple turnovers. Offensively, anytime you score 35 points, you ought to win a football game.
Right.
That's exactly what they did. And I do kind of want to go over the numbers again. Rushing leaders, so third in the area in rushing yards is quarterback Caden Vance. He has 354 on a year. He's averaging 118 rushing yards per game, 5.6 yards per carry, and he's tied for the area lead in rushing touchdowns. And then as a passing, he's third in the league, and he's third in the area in passing. 592 yards, good for 65% completion percentage, 197 passing yards per game, 7 passing touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. He's accounted essentially for 14 total touchdowns through 3 games, and that's as dual threat as it gets. And
Right.
that's really, really balanced right there.
I was going to say, well, over 1,000 total yards between the two, basically right at 1,000.
Yeah, pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we kind of expected this at the beginning of the year from him, and, he's just, running that train, right over top of everybody. And, I mean, for them to, I think, still a program that's, you're kind of wondering, okay, do they know how to win? Are they going to be able to keep this going? To go down and do what they did at Man, I thought was very impressive. You really kind of like the fact of the way the schedule kind of sets out for them. It kind of, everything's kind of right there. It's at home. The tough games are at home. They got Independence at home. I mean, that just absolutely, it's going to have to be a zoo that night, with the amount of people that'll be there for that game. So, impressive. I mean, I know even in the years they had the playoffs, I think I don't think they were 3-0, I believe, at that point. They win 2, but then didn't win the third. So, kudos to them. And, I mean, I don't know, do we start throwing Caden Vance in the Kennedy Award talk?
I was thinking about that earlier today. Realistically, for where they're at with their schedule, they'll have to probably win out, and he'll have to be playing in the semifinal game and hosting. And so much of that goes into it. Kennedy Award, when you get down to it, like, you're splitting hairs.
Right.
Like that's the reason you do it. He's definitely in our Offensive Player of the Year award race.
Yeah.
But they have to maintain it, and they have to keep winning, because what's going to happen is voters, and I do the same thing every year. This is why I write the Kennedy column, because I split it, and to me it matters a lot. I take it very seriously. We've had since I've been doing this, we've had 4 kids of the 7 years, and so I think that we kind of know what a Kennedy Award winner looks like. The numbers are there, but schedule again matters. I think the only time that it hadn't really mattered too much would probably be when Atticus won, and he still had really good numbers. Their schedule wasn't the toughest, but they did some nice things. They were a nice story. The Independence's schedule wasn't great the year that Judah ended up winning it, but at the same time, Judah also broke the 100-plus-year-old scoring record, and whenever he got up to Wheeling, he showed everyone why he was the Kennedy winner. And
I think that's what's hard at times, because sometimes you want to knock kids down too much on the schedule, and then just like you said with Judah, that when they get on the big stage, they can show what they want to do, and not throwing pressure on Caden or anything, but if he is going to be in that conversation, he is going to have to perform well against the Independences and things like that. If he does that, then he's definitely in the running.
Absolutely. It probably kind of reminiscent of his coach, Coker, because I just kind of did the math there between the rushing and the passing yards. He's over 300 yards a game that he's accounting for.
Yeah.
So, a lot of similarities there. It'll be fun to watch them as they develop. But this is kind of a team that's really passing every test that's been thrown at them so far.
And even Justin, he'll throw it to the kids, and he'll just say, it is the kids, but the impact he's made on this team, just in a short time, he's got them basically in the playoff, talk for sure, and really in the talk for, making it to Charleston. You just never know.
Absolutely. They cracked top 10 in some polls this week, so good look for the program. Last week, one game that I really want to hit on is Beckley Parkersburg South, and we talked about this one last week, and I want to draw this parallel just in the way that we talked about West Side need to beat Mingo Central to kind of prove that you're here. At Beckley, and Parkersburg South's a really good team. When I was doing the preview for this game, I went through the numbers. The personnel may have a drop off, but they have a good receiver, they have a good running back, they have a good quarterback, and they pack up yards and points. That's kind of what they've always done under Nate Tanner,
Right.
and it hasn't stopped this year. But if you're Beckley, to really want to be considered in that top 8, that top echelon of Quad A teams, I think you needed to win this game, and it kind of started to snowball there at the end of the second half.
Yeah.
South got 14 quick points, and Beckley just it's kind of the same issue, and we talked about this over the last couple of years when they started 5-1. You've looked at that Parkersburg South game, and it's like, no, one of these isn't like the other, and then once the schedule toughens up towards the end, it starts to catch up to them. And now I kind of wonder, and the schedule's a little bit different this year, but they've also, some of those teams have dropped down from Quad A. Spring Valley's not a Quad A team anymore. You're not getting the same points from that if you're able to win that game. So I think this was a really tough loss for Beckley, especially from the talking points of, you're trying to earn respect, and what they're doing is really good there. The program's in a much better spot than what it was 5 years ago.
Right.
But these are the games that you kind of have to win. And again, Parkersburg South's really good, but this is the one that you're looking at. It's like, man, your next chance to really kind of prove it's 3 or 4 weeks away.
Yeah. And really, if you'd have told us before the game that Gage Price was going to have the game that he had, you would have said, well, yeah, sure, Beckley's going to win this game without a problem. But it just seems like it's kind of the old thing with, at times when Beckley struggles, they can't get out of their own way a little bit. And, you can flip a game that's that close and that tight, key play here or there, 14 quick points makes a big difference, and it kind of changed the whole complexion of that game a little bit. And I was a little disappointed. I really thought Beckley, that was a game that they not only needed to win, but maybe should have won. They've got the team that can get that done. I don't know how it's going to. Ultimately, it doesn't affect them getting into playoffs, of course, because of the situation. But just kind of projections, we think they're going to be right in the middle of 4A when the first polls come out, the first ranking or ratings come out. But that's going to hurt down the road, because Parkersburg South's going to win some games for them, and that's 4A points that they don't have but 3 opportunities this year to get. So I don't know. I really thought that was Beckley's game, and I thought it was their game to prove just how good they were. And now we're not. It's not the end of the season by any means, but you just wonder the long-term effects going down the road. And when you don't win games like that, and you kind of get that old mentality wanting to try kind of creep in a little bit on you. And they've had some tough stretches going down the end of the season. So how are they going to handle that? Just mentally, they're going to be able to put that aside and keep on moving forward, because there are definitely some games in there for them to win, but there's still some tough games ahead. Spring Valley, Princeton, and those are AAA schools. They've got to win games like that, and it's going to be interesting to see how this game drags into the season, if they can kick it to the side, or if it is going to be a downer for them.
Absolutely, and you kind of make a good point there. When Parkersburg South scores 14 quick points there at the end of the half, that's the kind of game South wants to play. They want us to play quick. They want to get points on the board quick. That's the way that they've always operated. However they're doing it, they don't mind, but they want to get points. It's like, okay, now we can feel comfortable. If that game goes into halftime, maybe 7-0 or tied nothing, tied at 0, then maybe for South you're starting, okay, like what we do isn't working. Kids start to feel tight. Yeah, absolutely. But if you're Beckley, if you go and it's like, all right, this is kind of where we want to be. Obviously we want to score a little bit more, but we've dictated the terms of the game. Defense, run the ball, slow the game down, things like that. And it just didn't happen. But you do bring up a good point with Gage Price. I thought it happened last year when Devin Richardson was the quarterback. When they were kind of forced to go to the air, they found some success, and they were able to do some things a little bit differently. I felt like maybe that's what happened. Well, with Richardson last year, I thought that they ended up having to do that later in the year.
Right.
If you get Gage's feet a little bit wet, and I understand he struggled when they played up in the Panhandle in Week 1, but you got something to build on here, win or lose.
Yeah, he really had a really good game, and that's the thing, is can you take the positives out of it and keep pushing forward and win some of those games that are going to be 50-50 games, going down the stretch, because those are going to be important. But it's just unfortunate, that the kid had such a good game, and it kind of went by the boards. But we felt like he was going to be a good quarterback, and maybe that's his breakout game, where he can really turn it on now.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up week one. Do you have any takeaways or any observations?
No, just I'm stunned from Princeton. They're fun to watch, but man, you just wonder how that can keep going, throughout the year. And again, it's just a lot of competitive games. But I think we're starting to see some of the cream rise to the top just a little bit in some of these classes. And as far as our area teams go, Independence is kind of showing themselves as the team we thought they could be, and working towards that. And the West Side's really, kind of making their statement, things like that. So, I've enjoyed the season maybe more than I have in a long time, because, we've just had competitive games, good games, a lot of talent out there and a lot of young talent, which, bodes well for the future. So, I look forward to Friday nights. Sometimes, I admit, in the past, I wasn't looking forward to Friday nights, because, you can only cover so many 50-0 or 50-7 games before it's like, get me to Saturday with something else.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the takeaway was just to play the quarterbacks. Again, I wrote about in the Deep Post this week, but Max Simpson and Brock Green, two AA quarterbacks, are both freshmen, and for two programs that have ignited their own little rivalry. That could be fun to watch, especially if Independence ends up. And obviously the play of the veterans. I say veteran with Chance Barker. He's 1 year under his belt, but he's first team All-State quarterback still. But Barker and Vance. And then, Jalen Younger, quarterback from Montcalm. Right now he's second in the area in passing. He's a senior, 656 yards. Tied with Hamrick and Barker for area lead and touchdown passes with 8 each.
And wants to play running back.
Yeah, and wants to play running back. But yeah, the quarterback play, and I feel like we kind of saw this shift 2 years ago, where we were seeing a lot more, teams are becoming a little more pass dominant and pass heavy.
Right.
So to me, kind of following that trend, I don't think we had a 1,000-yard rusher until week 9 or 10, which is really weird. Usually by like 5 or 6, we'd have a kid or two that have 300-yard performance and be over 1,000 yards. We're not seeing that as much. The quarterbacks are going to get there, and there's going to be multiple, I imagine, that are going to be there before the running backs get to 1,000 yards.
All I can say is glad we really don't have a deadline per se.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are deadline killers with all those passes.
All those
what was your game? Was like 11:30 that night or something? It was real late.
So the the Bluefield Greenbrier Ace game was, and obviously both those quarterbacks threw almost 30 times each.
Right.
The Independence Nicholas County one wasn't as bad. I think that's the earliest one's ended. Now, again, I covered 2 Princeton games, and Princeton, their games always go late because they throw the ball so much.
I got pretty lucky on that. Of course, I think the first quarter made a huge difference there, because they really didn't throw it much in the first quarter, and Oak Hill possessed it. But I think it was 10 o'clock, a little after 10. Of course, it's a trick always getting out of John P. Deuce Stadium. But, it was pretty smooth that night.
Absolutely. Going ahead and preview week 4. A couple of the games I really have highlighted: Scott at Independence, Bluefield at Beckley, Wheeling Central at Midland Trail, James Monroe at Liberty. Scott at Independence, I want to start there. That's the game that I'll be at. We talked about it. Independence has a really tough schedule this year, and the Scott game is just the latest iteration of that.
Right.
And Scott comes into the year, they're considered to be one of the title favorites in AA. Independence, a little bit more outside the dark horse, although I think they're probably one of the top 3 teams in AA.
So too. I think they're proving that.
And I think this is their first opportunity to put the whole state on notice. You're going to welcome in a very talented team, really good running back, good receiver, good quarterback. And it's their home opener for Independence. We've talked about it. They've been all over the state. I don't think they've played a home game in nearly a year. And this is their opportunity to kind of come out and show out. And we talked about it for Brock Green. It'll be his first home start of his career. Right. This is a game, Independence's defense, I think this will be a real test for them, because I think Carson Brinegar is still there for Scott, and that's a kid that's been a track athlete like Star, that's competed for state championships in the 100 and 200 too, so they'll have to find a way to cap him, get pressure on their quarterback. This is really one of those early season pivotal matchups that's going to kind of impact the face of the playoff race.
And it's weird because, I mean, didn't Scott they got a thump the first week of the season,
Yeah,
didn't they? That's
Wayne,
such a
Wayne.
shocker. I mean, that's why I thought maybe, okay, well, maybe they're not as good as they were, were projected to be, and then they turned around last week with a big win last week. So I think, they're, they are the team we thought they were going to be, coming into the season. But, yeah, I mean, they're looking at it the same way. If they can beat Independence, look at all the points they're going to be gathering from that. And, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. If there are going to be a lot of balls in the air, or teams are going to try to control it with the run a little bit. I know with it being the home opener in Coal City, and people have been waiting and waiting and waiting for that to happen, and that's going to be an absolute electric environment. Should be an incredible game, and I don't know. I mean, I think Independence can definitely win this game, but if you fall asleep in a couple places, Scott's going to hurt you.
Absolutely, and I think Scott will probably travel pretty well too. Like I said, this is a game that's going to draw statewide attention because of the teams that have. Realistically, I think both these teams, and again, seeding plays into this. I think they'll both be playing the day after Thanksgiving.
Because they're only about a little over an hour, hour and a half, maybe at the most.
The neighbors from Boone County.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, that's the game I've got. The game you have is Bluefield at Beckley. For as impressive as Max looked on Thursday, this is going to be a challenge for him. We talked about it. A.J. Thomas had another interception against Parkersburg South. He has 4 on the year. I would locate that guy. I do the same thing that Tom Brady said that he did with Ed Reed. He had a note on his wristband every time, find Ed Reed at the snap, and don't throw it in his direction. So that's probably what I would do if I were Max. I'd be like, all right, A.J. Thomas is over there. We're not going to throw over there.
Right. Just a ton of storylines in this game. And how well Beckley bounced back. Definitely this falls under the category of a must-win. There's no doubt about it. You can't afford a loss to a AA school at this point in the season. In regards to trying to keep the home field for the first round of playoffs. How well the quarterbacks bounce back. They both had really good games. Will they continue that trend? Can they keep going? How can Bluefield handle Beckley's line? Beckley's line's huge. I don't know if they can, if they can handle that, really, if they can, stop the run, because if Beckley can run it down your throat, they're going to run it down your throat. Just a lot of things to look at. And honestly, just how banged up is Bluefield right now, because they've really played some tough games to start this season. They had some injury issues in the Greenbrier East game. Just how well are they going to be physically, when they match up against a very physical Beckley team.
Yeah, and we talked about it. If Beckley doesn't have to throw it, they probably won't.
Right.
But, with King out, that really impacts everything. The dominoes start to fall, and I think at one point they've had to start a freshman safety back there that teams have kind of targeted a little bit. And understandably so. You're talking about a 14-year-old kid, and passing attacks are more sophisticated. You talked about he played Chance Barker in the first game that he had to play in, and Barker's a kid threw 48 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions last year. That's a really tough game. It's a tough kid to play against. But yeah, that's really a point that I'm looking at for Bluefield, because given what happened with King, I think it's like an ankle injury, and he was battling it. I don't think he played in the second half of the Graham game. I don't think he'll be able to go for this game. Now, things could change, but
Well, you saw the Greenbrier East game with Beckley. Brody just didn't have any time. So how much time is Max going to have? To get in position to be able to throw the ball. I mean, I thought he did a good job scrambling, making some big plays off of the scramble the other night, but I don't know if he's going to be able to do that, because as good as Brody ran the ball and as good as he can move, he struggled that night. So Beckley's pretty legit in the trenches.
And another thing too, Jaden Francisco at one point exited that game, and he's a starting lineman for Bluefield and probably their best overall player. Really good defensive player, good offensive lineman. I don't think he came back in for that final drive.
Right.
Had the shoulder pads off, getting his shoulder looked at. Is he healthy? Because I don't think you can afford to lose your best player, especially in a game like that against Beckley.
Right.
So for as good as Simpson looked on Thursday, this could kind of be another rough one. And,
right.
He'll be better for it in the future, but I probably wouldn't go into this game expecting another 380-yard passing performance. And
No,
I think Beckley's going to be prepared for that.
Right.
Another note, just on this game, I think that not the date itself, but marks 40 years since these two teams met in the '84 playoffs, first round. I think that was like a 21-15 game. And that was when they were both in AAA. Bluefield ended up going on winning a state championship that year, and it was at Lately Field that year.
Right.
I think Beckley had Bull Parker on that team,
Yep.
so yeah.
Yep.
Bluefield had Cortez Martin. Yeah, it's a lot. It sounds like a
It's
lot of fun there.
Really good football then, that's for
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Absolutely. Moving on, Wheeling Central at Midland Trail. Midland Trail got back in the win column for the first time this year last week. I think they beat Braxton County, and I don't think Braxton County has scored yet. But
Right.
you know, sometimes you just need to get a win.
Right.
If you're Midland Trail, back in the grinder though, because Wheeling Central is probably not the team.
Right.
They led Williamstown for a little while, then Williamstown erupted in the second half of that game, and they've already come down here once and they've beaten James Monroe. That's a tough game for Trail.
And, you know, we talked about it earlier, you know, we really were, you know, didn't know what to think of the Clay County game when Trail lost that game. You know, kind of felt like Trail maybe, you know, we thought they were going to win that game. But then Clay County goes up there and almost beats Roane County last week. So, you know, that game may have been a lot tougher than, you know, what was first thought. So, you know, you hope that's the case for Trail because they definitely going to have to bring it this week. You know, Wheeling Central is going to be stinging after a couple straight losses, and they're going to definitely want to be getting back in the win column, especially get on the turf, you know, which it seems to help teams like that who are a little faster and can get to the edge a little bit. So, you know, it's going to be a tough one for Trail, and you know, it could be a statement game. You know, you wind up winning a game like that, you know, that's a huge statement.
You know, one thing for Midland Trail, and I just wanted to double check on this. I don't think they have anybody that's rushed for over 150 yards. Now, they distribute their ball carries, but that's, you know, from the good trail teams we've seen in the past, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
They turn the ball over through the air quite a bit. I think Thad Brown has 5 interceptions so far on the year.
Yep.
I think their best route is probably to find a way to shorten the game. Kind of like what I'd imagine what James Monroe tried to do. We talked about it. That was a 14-0 game at halftime.
Yep.
And then Wheeling Central got some big plays, was able to squeak away.
Right.
Won the game 28-6. I think for Trail, you're trying to do something like that.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if they have the run game as it stands right now to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's, you know, you don't want to give up big plays, and you don't want Wheeling Central handling the ball, you know, the majority of the time. So, you know, a lot of times passing the ball isn't the right way to go that, you know, in as far as strategy. But, you know, we'll see if they can run the ball, then they may have a shot. But I really felt like going into the season they were going to be able to run the football pretty good, you know, I really did. So, you know, we'll see. But definitely a big task, you know. 2-2 is a lot better than 1-3, but you know, Wheeling Central's Wheeling Central.
Absolutely. James Monroe at Liberty. James Monroe got back in the win column last week for the first time, much like Midland Trail, but they ended up beating Pikeview. Found a little more success on offense. Leighton Dowdy had 3 rushing touchdowns in that game and threw for another 1. And then Liberty last week, they fell against Mingo Central. Mingo got their first win. Liberty right now is without Jackson Workman, who is projected to be their starting quarterback. He got hurt in the Poca game, and he's going to be out a couple of weeks. I think with Chase Shea, though, they found some efficiency because he was 8 of 12.
Right.
And I don't really know how the game really progressed or how it played out. I was kind of surprised with the passing efficiency. They didn't throw a little bit more, and I don't think he turned the ball over.
Right.
But yeah, that's for Liberty. I think this is a chance to really kind of get things going in the right direction. If you're James Monroe, you come in as a favorite. You don't want to lose this game because, again, your schedule is really tough for the rest of the way still. You know, talked about you got Greenbrier West still down the road. You got Bluefield at the end of the year. So you're trying to get the wins however you want. But I think this is a game I like having it in week 4 because it helps us understand who these teams are almost halfway through the season. Yeah,
and it's really a big game for both teams. You know, I mean, both of them. Liberty's kind of looking for some momentum, and James Monroe has got to feel like they gained some momentum last week and got on the right track a little bit, and they want to keep going. So, I don't know. Those teams have always seemed to have played really good games against each other. So, you know, there's always your occasional blowout in there. And, you know, even during the years that the Liberty's struggling, you know, with personnel, you can understand that. But when they both have good personnel, they've had some really good games over the years. So, I look for it to be a pretty good game. Just got to stay away from that big play. James Monroe's got some big play guys.
Just before we wrap up a lot of the football stuff, I do kind of want to hit on Shady Spring for a second. Now, obviously, we've talked about it, the whole schedule thing. We can't ignore that, but a shutout of Summers County, and when Summers County sent in their stats, there were a lot of fumbles from Summers. I think they had like 4 or 5 fumbles and a couple interceptions too. A lot of turnovers. Shady seemed to really take advantage, but I've kind of been impressed with Miles Clark. He started he has started 2 games in a row now.
Yep.
He's been about a 50% passer. That's not really what was expected of him. He hasn't turned the ball over through the air.
Yep.
That's kind of a steady, neat little thing to have. And I believe they're off this week and they'll return next week. But if you're trying to look for something to build off of, and it's encouraging, especially after the Roane County win. It seems to be that your defense so far for the teams you played, it's really kind of snapped back into shape.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was the key, is that they've been so good defensively. You don't know how many of those fumbles were forced fumbles as opposed to, dropped on the carpet. But, we felt like Shady was going to be good on defense this year, and they're starting to show that now. They're going to need that going forward. There's no doubt about that. But, the young quarterback's been a little bit of a surprise. It wasn't the situation we thought they would be in, but you always have to be ready to play. You have to be ready to take over whenever the opportunity comes around, and this young man's done a good job.
Absolutely. Moving on to some of the soccer that we have coming up this week. We talked about it. Beckley has had a really good couple of weeks now. The win over Charleston Catholic, the win at Oak Hill, and then they went down to Princeton and they won last week. And again, Princeton was without their best player, had another kid lost during the game.
Right.
But still, Beckley goes down. They're basically halfway to securing home field throughout the section, and if you get there, you're out the state tournament since you're the host venue anyways.
Right.
Now Greenbrier East, bit of a regression, of course. They've lost a lot of kids from that team that won the state championship 2 years ago. But Saturday, they welcomed number 2 Huntington, and Huntington has a win over GW. And they beat them, and I messaged you about this. I was like, wow, what happened? We're not entirely sure, if this was just kind of a turning point for East or what happened. But it's a nice little prelude into the game Thursday whenever Beckley and Greenbrier East meet. Games are always usually good between these two teams, even when Greenbrier East has kind of had the better roster or whatever. Always closer, competitive.
Yep.
And to me, like, that Huntington game kind of opens some eyes around the state. And if you're Beckley and you have serious title aspirations, this is a nice little chance to go in there and kind of pick up a win. And also, if you're Greenbrier East and you've come off a win against Huntington, this is your chance to, like, hey, like, we're still in this race. Like, I'll let people know statewide. So there's going to be a lot of eyes in the soccer community on this game on Thursday.
Yeah, when we saw the game this weekend, it was an eye-opener, because, with Huntington being ranked what they were. And but, when I talked to Lucas, before the season about his Greenbrier East team, he was really confident with this group, and I think maybe it's just one of those situations where they just had to kind of play a little bit to kind of get, the chemistry going, but he was definitely, felt that he had the team that could win this section. There's no doubt about it. And of course, Beckley's kind of broke the ice a little bit. Of course, now they played 3 really top quality teams to start the season. But they only got 2 goals in those 3 games. And it seemed like after the game after that was when the dam broke a little bit, and they've been pouring shots in right and left. So that's going to be the thing is can Greenbrier East keep them out of the goal, and can they defend them and still get scores on the other end because Beckley's pretty hard to handle right now. They control every game I've watched them play. They control possessions basically the entire game. Even against Princeton, they did for the most part. Princeton had a couple little chances here and there, but Beckley. A lot of times you watch them play and they win 4 or 5 to nothing. You think, wow, man, that could have been 10 to nothing. They really pour the shots in. So it's always, like you say, a crazy game between these two. It's unpredictable, so you just never know what's going to happen. Don't know if they'll play it on the grass or if it'll get moved up to the football field. Evidently going to have a lot of rain, the next 3 days. So, we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. But, it's definitely a little bit more sauce on the spaghetti right now.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on volleyball? Obviously, the poll dropped today. Recording this on Monday. Greenbrier West still at #1, as you mentioned. James Monroe up to &3 in AA, and then Thursday we have a pretty big try match with I think 2, 3, and 4 in AAA.
Yeah, it's Woodrow's playing well. They're number, I believe, 5 in Quad A. They're playing really well right now, and they were. I know they were runner-up in the Shirley Brown, but they played well in both of their tournaments following. Shady seems to be the team that's really kind of finding its way now. They had some issues with some illness and injuries earlier in the year, and they are really kind of finding their way a little bit now. They were runner-up Philip Barber, runner-up Bridgeport in those big tournaments, and those are big-time teams there. So they're looking pretty good. James Monroe is really clicking. In AA, they're I believe 4th now, and I think they're actually tied for 3rd. You're looking in AA, you're looking at Oak Glen, defending AA state champion, Williamstown, 3-time Class A state champion that's moved up, Philip Barber. They've had a ton of state championships, and they were the runner-up last year, and James Monroe is right there in the mix with them. So, that top 4 in AAA is brutal, to say the least, and then there's good teams behind them. So you fall asleep on those other teams, you can get yourself in trouble. But those 4 teams are going to be the teams probably to battle it out, once it gets down, barring injuries and things like that. So, and then Greenbrier West is coming off the Nicholas County Invitational win Saturday. Played real well. Presley Treadway's playing really good. Paige Neal is playing really well. Not Paige Neal. I forgot her last name now. But they're all playing really well. So, it's about what you expect right now. We got about a month to go till, the sectionals fire up and regionals, however that thing breaks down now. It's all crazy what it is, but postseason, let's call it. But, again, the cream is starting to come to the top. Other teams are playing better. So, the tri-match you referred to is going to be Greenbrier East and Herbert Hoover at Shady. Hoover's 2, Shady's 3, East is 4, I believe. So, that's in AAA. So, and any 3 of those teams can win a state title. 2 of them, one of them's definitely not going to make it down there because they're all in the same region. So, one will bow out for sure. And teams behind them are good too. So, Thursday should be a big deal with a big soccer match and a big tri-match in volleyball.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap things up with our Player of the Week picks. The Player of the Week winners for the southern part of the state, Week 3, Max Simpson from Bluefield. And for the Kanawha Valley, it's David Robinson, running back from Capital. We were both in agreement on Simpson. Robinson had a really big game, over 100 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. I had a chance to see him against Princeton, so I know he's pretty legit. He's one of the most dynamic players I've seen all season and really gave them quite a fit, whether it be in the running game or the receiving game. But Simpson, we talked about this. Week 3 was loaded with tough performances. Wyatt Klein had 3 fumble recoveries. Kyler Canada, really good game for West Side on both sides of the ball. Silas Nelson, 4 touchdowns, almost 250-plus yards from scrimmage. Really hard to choose from, and we always have a week or two like this, and this was kind of that week.
And the only reason you give it the nod to Max is just the gravity of the whole situation. The comeback, the fact that he's such a young kid, and had players out that he really 2 of their better players out. Just the whole gravity of the situation was kind of miraculous in football terms. It's just almost a miracle type win. And I was just the pass he made at the end of that game still sticks in my mind, and will for a long time, because that was his last shot, and he puts it over the defender right on the back line of the end zone. Perfect pass. The kid didn't have to do anything crazy. It was right in his hands. So just an incredible performance, and you know, it's a shame we couldn't give about 4 or 5 awards this week because, you know, it was hard to pick, but you know, things like that with the gravity of the game and everything kind of sets it apart a little bit.
Yeah, I think to me you explained it pretty well. I mean, for me, Simpson, it just meant a lot. Obviously, 0-2, Greenbrier East, I think they're a good AAA team. You had to come back. You lead your team 21 points in the fourth quarter, 3 touchdown passes, 380 yards. All that context matters to me, and that's kind of what I think did it.
Yep.
You know, you mentioned it, but the only pass he completed in the first half was to Jeff King. That's a kid, like we said, did not play in the second half because of an injury.
And that was a lot on King.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a great catch. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up. Again, should be a fun week. Looking forward to talking about these results from week 4 when we move back up next week. I think there will be a lot to discuss.
I do too. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. For my co-host Russ Udy, I'm Tyler Jackson, sports editor at Lootpress. I want to give a shout out to our producer / video editor Austin Sims for all the great work he does. We'll see you next week.